Hi there, welcome back to the Forward Operations Devlog series, where I pause development every 90 days on my hobbyist game dev project to catalog the latest progress and challenges. This sprint, I tackled unit movement, which may sound simple, but in a game where individual soldiers have their own psychology and act on their own volition, forming them into fire teams and having them appear like they're working together is a little tricky. For starters, the very concept of a unit is brand new to the game as of this sprint, let alone a hierarchy of units like two buddy teams composing a fire team. Also, influenced by some of my favorite tactical games, I decided to implement a system of issuing orders in a chain that each soldier needs to complete, which just adds more complexity. So, with that said, I'm Jarrett, and this is my hobbyist game dev channel, Damage Algebra. Now, on to what I actually did this sprint and how I did it. The theme of this 90-day sprint was basic unit management, which required a few things. First, we needed a flexible way to organize individual soldiers into a unit structure. Second, we needed a way to move the unit where we wanted them to go. Lastly, we want the individual soldiers to behave like they are actually a part of a unit that supports one another, and not just individuals independently following orders. I also had a stretch goal of splitting a unit into smaller parts and issuing orders separately to each part, but I didn't quite get there. Something to look forward to in the next video, I guess. For unit organization, I spent a lot of time researching basic US Army tactical doctrine. The goal was to model real-life structures to increase the ways a player can choose to engage with enemies. The US Army actually makes quite a bit of doctrinal information available for free online, so that was a big help. What I learned is that the lowest unit of organization is a buddy team, which is 2 soldiers. If you put 2 buddy teams together, you get a fire team of 4 soldiers. Typically, a fire team has a leader, a rifleman, a grenadier, and a squad automatic weapon or SAW gunner. Put 2 fire teams together with a squad leader, and that's a full squad with 9 soldiers. So what we have is a hierarchical structure where soldiers belong to buddy teams, and buddy teams belong to fire teams, and fire teams belong to squads. Thanks to the composable data structures I explained way back in episode 2 of these devlogs, setting up parent-child relationships was fairly easy. First, I created a child units data component that has several slots to reference child entities. For now, there's a commander, alpha, and bravo slot. For a fire team, there is no commander, so that stays null, and the alpha and bravo slots would reference buddy team entities. To map the relationship in the other direction, I created a parent unit data component. It just has a single variable to hold a reference to the parent unit, as the name implies. These data components are simple, but they're also fairly dumb. There's no real validation, so I can assign any entity as a child of any other entity or create a circular reference if I'm not careful. Validation will need to happen in my service layer, and I will get to that, eventually. Because the data components by themselves don't identify what kind of entity any particular entity actually is, I also added the isFireTeam and the isBuddyTeam data components so I can tag these new types of entities. With these new data components, I created a fireteam entity, 2 buddy team entities, and added 3 more soldiers to my sample scene. After connecting up all the entities, I had a fire team of 4 soldiers organized into 2 buddy teams. Following the Army doctrine documents, I have the fire team leader and the SAW gunner together in the Alpha buddy team, while the grenadier and the rifleman are in the Bravo buddy team. The nice thing about this composable data structure is in the future, I could give the player the ability to organize the fire team however they like, but that's something for later. I could have kept going up the chain, organizing a squad or a platoon, but this was good enough for now. Next, I needed a way to issue orders to an entire unit. The easiest place to start was just issuing a move command, so that was my focus for this sprint. My first source of inspiration for how to accomplish this was the Close Combat series. In those games, you right-click on a unit, select a command from a menu, and then click on the target location or enemy. Now, I didn't end up sticking with this solution for long, so I won't go into too much detail, but implementing this was not too difficult, especially since I could leverage some existing systems like the command menu system. At a high level, a command is assigned to the unit command data component, and the manages unit command's behavior on the unit's game object reacts to that change in data. The unit tells each pawn it controls to go to the assigned location. The pawns then manage their own movement to the location, and when they arrive, they signal that they've completed the command. The unit listens for each pawn's signal and marks the command complete when all the pawns have arrived at the location. This was a fine beginning, but we just have soldiers moving in a straight line from one point to another. What if we want them to avoid a particular bit of terrain? This requires introducing waypoints, which means that the target of a command is not a single point, but actually a list of points. To accommodate waypoints, I created the concept of a command chain, which is made up of command links. Since command links have a reference to the link before and after them, they form a doubly linked list, which is great for traversing in either direction, up or down the chain. The command chain is just an object that contains the command links and allows for registering event listeners for when things change in any of the links. Turns out this works well, but I needed to come up with a way for the player to enter waypoints. In older RTS games, you could hold shift and click on a point to set a waypoint, but I didn't want to do that in this game. Instead, I took a page from some of my favorite tactical games of the past decade, Ultimate General Civil War and Door Kickers 2. Both of these games rely on path drawing mechanics to tell units exactly where you want them to go. It's simple and intuitive, and it gives the player a ton of control, so it felt like the right mechanic, even if it was going to be a lot of extra work. Since I already have a way of issuing a command chain with multiple command links, I just needed to build out the line drawing system that would generate the individual links and then assign them to the unit. First, I updated the input system to be able to differentiate between a click and a drag. Now, when the player holds down the left mouse button, the game will check every frame how far the cursor has moved from its original position. If it moves beyond a certain threshold, the input system moves into drag mode and triggers a drag started event with the initial click data. When the left mouse button is released, the drag stopped event is triggered. Next, I created a drag system that reacts to these events. When a drag starts, it keeps track of the cursor position in the game world. Here I'm actually sampling the nav mesh because I want to know the closest reachable point to where the cursor is pointing. Whenever the cursor moves more than a meter from the last position, this generates a new waypoint. When the drag stops, the points are converted into command links, which are added to a new command chain object, and that object is assigned to the unit so it can be executed. To draw the line itself, I just used the line renderer component, updating its points each cycle. To get the path to look decent, I rotated it 90 degrees on the x-axis and set its alignment to transform Z, so it is always facing up towards the sky. I also added a half meter to the Y position of all the points, so they're a little off the ground. And with that, now I have a very, very basic system where I can click on a unit and drag out a path for it to follow. Once the player releases the left mouse button, the input system throws an event to signal the end of the drag, and the drag system creates a command chain from the points and sets it on the target unit. From here, the unit can assign the links down to its pawns like it was already doing. It's not glamorous, but it feels pretty good to play with for being so rough. Definitely going to improve on this mechanic in the future, but it works for now, and I like it a lot. So that brings us to the final enhancement of this sprint, getting the individual soldiers to behave in a way that makes it feel to the player like they really are a unit. There's so much I could do to accomplish this task, so I narrowed it down to trying to eliminate any behavior that made it look painfully obvious that there was no coordination between the soldiers. The first thing I implemented, even before I implemented the drag system, was having the soldiers space themselves correctly when moving. I didn't want them all to follow the path in a single file line. According to the US Army doctrine documents I found, fire teams move in various formations, but a popular and recurring formation is an arrow shape. This puts the leader in front, flanked to either side by the saw gunner and grenadier, and the rifleman off to the side of the grenadier. I accomplished this by assigning every soldier a position index, which maps to an array of offsets. When a soldier moves to its next location, it applies the offset to that location, which puts it in the right spot in the formation. Next, I wanted the soldiers to wait for everyone to get into formation before moving. It was always a little jarring to drag a path and have the squad leaders start moving along the path while the rest of their unit was getting into position. It didn't make any sense for the squad leader to leave its unit behind. For this, I added a Boolean flag to the command link class that tells the unit if it should wait for all of the pawns to complete the link before issuing the next link. By setting this to true on the first link in the chain, all the pawns will wait for the last pawn to get in position before moving out. This solution works so well, I used it again to solve a similar problem. Turns out when the path is curved or has a lot of obstacles, one pawn might get left behind. It's a bad look if your unit doesn't wait for you to catch up. So the idea here is, whenever a pawn completes the link, the unit will check to see if that pawn is 3 links ahead. If it is, then it marks that link as needing to be completed before the pawns can move on. This has the effect of pausing the unit in order to let the straggler catch back up. And once they have, then the entire unit can move out together. The final enhancement was just having the pawns arrange themselves in a straight line when they reached the end of the command chain. I felt it didn't make sense to maintain the arrow formation when you reach the end, and a battle line made more sense. For this one, when the pawn is working on a link that has no next link, meaning it's the end of the chain, the logic that manages the position offset will change the angle to 90 degrees left or right, but keep the offset distance, which would form a line. It's just a couple of tweaks, but I think it makes the unit feel much more like an actual unit. It's light years away from being perfect, but it's pretty good for a starting point, I think. Well, that's it for this sprint. There's a few things I didn't get to that I hope to, like splitting a fire team into buddy teams that can be given orders separately. I also added some technical debt around refactoring the drag system to make it more generic. There's just too much hard-coded at the moment to consider it done. That said, I am really excited to keep building on this foundation. Just moving the fire team around the map is so satisfying, so I feel like I'm moving in at least the right direction. Hopefully in the next sprint, I'll have more positive developments to share. That's it for now, though. If you'd like to follow along with future videos, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment below. And of course, I'd appreciate a like if you liked the video. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Take care.